Joining me on the show now is former Indian ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Meera Shankar. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining me on Global Lens. Let me begin by asking you this. India and France are marking, as we know, the 25th anniversary of their strategic partnership. This is, in fact, the 6th time that a French leader will be the chief guest at India's Republic Day parade. Do you believe that this visit is a largely ceremonial one, high on symbolism, and that it's, more a celebration of the strong partnership and friendship between the two countries than anything else?
Yes, I do. I do feel that is the case because the leaders met for a fairly substantive visit just in July 2023 in Paris. And so this coming so shortly after that will really be an occasion for celebration because Prime Minister Modi was the chief guest at their National Day celebrations, and President Macron has come as the chief guest for our Republic Day celebrations. But of course, underlying this is the fact that France is perhaps India's most important strategic partner in Western Europe. And particularly in the defense and security sectors. And the French, having, created their own autonomous space vis-a-vis the Western Alliance, even though they are part of the Western Alliance, by having their own nuclear force in the teeth of American, in defiance of the Americans at that stage, understand India's desire for strategic autonomy. And both are powers, not necessarily, amongst the three great powers, US, China, and Russia, but they are substantial powers with a sense of the role they can play internationally to influence and shape outcomes. So I think there is an underlying element of trust and commonality on certain issues, which bring the two countries together. And of course, this will be an opportunity to see where they have progressed on the Horizon 2047 agenda, which they had laid out in July 23 while renewing their strategic partnership for another 25 years.
I will dwell on the significance of the strategic partnership in just a moment. But I need to ask you another question. It has been reported that President Macron accepted India's invite for the Republic Day function at short notice after President Biden said he was unable to come. There are some commentators, many in fact, who say that this proves the strength of the bilateral relationship. There are some who also have said that this sends out the message that India has many powerful friends today. How would you look at this?
Of course, it does send out a message that India has friends across the spectrum and many strategic partners who play an important role in our technological development, particularly in the defense space, nuclear energy sectors. I think France really has played an important role in these sectors.
Okay. So, talking about the strategic partnership, France became India's first strategic partner in the Western world. And for France, India was the first non-European partner. France, in fact, began transferring defense technology to India long before the United States took the decision to do so, just last year. And as I was discussing with Ambassador Kanwal Sibal earlier, significantly, France is a country that stood by India after our nuclear tests. When countries like the US imposed sanctions on us, France actually opposed those sanctions. Therefore, in your assessment, would it be correct to say that, and also not to mention the fact that France has supported India at multiple international forums, including the United Nations Security Council. Therefore, has France emerged as one of the most reliable partners for India?
Yes, I think France has emerged as a reliable partner for India, and I think uh, the French position on India's nuclear tests, where they were the one Western country which did not impose sanctions on India, reflected their understanding of India's desire for strategic autonomy in a situation where it is surrounded by nuclear weapon states. Because France, as I told you, had, in the teeth of American opposition, exercised its own option to develop a small nuclear deterrent, which they have. They have their own nuclear weapons. And so they understood this. And they are now, I think, our second largest supplier. And also going beyond defense sales to joint production with their technology in India. For instance, our submarines are being produced with their technology. We earlier had the Mirage jets, which we had bought from France, and we still have some active squadrons active in the Air Force. And those two were, the technology was licensed and we were producing them in India. Now, during Prime Minister Modi's visit to France in 23, they had discussed some additional uh, possibilities in the field of defense, including 26 Rafale jet fighters for our indigenous aircraft carrier, the Vikrant, and then building of 3 additional Scorpene submarines with French technology in India. And these would really come to about $9 to $10 billion worth of deals. But I think the details and the negotiations on the deals are still ongoing. So no final agreement is expected during this visit. But those would be important agreements when the countries take them forward. There were also discussions on, the 3 pillars outlined in the Horizon 47 agenda. And those 3 pillars were partnership for security and sovereignty, partnership for global issues or global challenges, and partnership for people. Now, under the defense rubric for the partnership for security and sovereignty, they had really agreed on certain potential projects which could be carried forward under the Make in India. For instance, to develop a jet fighter here for our multi-role combat aircraft, and also possibly for our helicopters and so on. I suppose those are still at a very incipient stage, and whether they will fructify or not remains to be seen, but not lacking in ambition in terms of where the two countries want to go. In terms of the second pillar, for a partnership for a better world, they really will be discussing aspects of climate change uh, uh, and biodiversity conservation or protection, and also eradication of poverty. I think these are the 3 aspects that they're going to focus on. And under the people-to-people partnership, my sense is that France wants to discuss greater mobility for Indian students, academics, research workers to go to France. They hope to have 20,000 Indian students by 2025 and 30,000 by 2030, and want to give longer term Schengen visas to those who do a semester in France, provided they get an MA degree from a recognized university, and so on. So more mobility between people, particularly students, academicians, and researchers, more cooperation in the field of culture, for instance, in museology. India is, of course, shifting its national museum to North and South Block. So we would have the challenge of really adapting the buildings of North and South Block, which were not meant for being museums, but were really office buildings for use as a national museum. And I think France has extensive specialization in the field of museology. And so that would be something worth looking at, how the two countries can work together to see that we can improve our museology expertise in India, and also with regard to the new National Museum project. And of course, I forgot, in the field of security, we also look at the whole area of internal security, because France has also faced the challenge of terrorism stemming from religious extremism. And India too has faced it. So terrorism is one area where the two countries cooperate together. Cyber security is another. And the third area is really, the whole question of intelligence and information sharing and upgradation of capabilities and technologies. So it's a pretty vast agenda on the security side. Globally, of course, we have the Indo-Pacific, where the two countries have a joint group and they cooperate with each other in this area, in the Indian Ocean in particular. And they've also had trilaterals with India, France, UAE, India, France, Australia. So they want to expand the area of cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. And right up there, right now, you have major global crises with the Ukraine war in Europe, which is still ongoing, and the new crisis in the Middle East.
Middle East, yes.
And of course, that's something which both countries would want to discuss, because I think the longer these conflicts persist, the more the possibilities of global destabilization, of economic consequences which hurt the developing countries. And so I think it would be, in the fitness of things for India to discuss what could be done to try to, bring an end to some of these conflicts. What is it that will enable, the ongoing conflicts to reach some kind of, stoppage of hostilities, even if no permanent peace?
Absolutely. And in fact, the relentless attacks by the Houthis on shipping in the Red Sea have already hurt global trade and economy. And let's not forget that the French president has been actually one of the most outspoken critics of Israel's war on Hamas, someone who's repeatedly called for a ceasefire. Therefore, chances are these issues are going to figure in the bilateral talks between the two leaders tonight. Let me ask you a different question, ma'am. A lot is said these days about personal chemistry between leaders. Especially, I think, where Prime Minister Modi is concerned. Even today, we saw those warm hugs in Jaipur. I know there are those who believe that partnerships exist between nations and not individual leaders. But there are many who say that the personal chemistry and camaraderie between Prime Minister Modi and President Macron that has evolved over the years has now become a significant part of the India-French partnership. How do you look at it?
Well, I am one of those who believes that nations build their relations on the basis of fundamental interests. But good partnership between leaders can only help. It's a positive.
It is certainly a positive, but all right, it's
No,
ultimately
even if,
nations.
look,
Yeah.
even if there are, good reasons for countries to be together, if the leaders don't get on, I think that can have, limiting impact on the relationship. And if the leaders do get on, then it certainly is a bonus and, helps to build the potential of the relationship.
Most certainly it does. You refer to the Indo-Pacific. So let's talk about that. Um, you know, India and France, as we know, are key partners in the Indo-Pacific region, and China is perceived as the common threat in the region. How important do you believe is the China factor in the India-French relationship today? Of course, it's constantly said that countries like the US today see India as a countervailing force against China. Do you think it's a significant factor between India and France as well?
I think that, India and France are brought together by their interests in building a defense and security relationship. And of course, that has spilled over to the Indian Ocean itself, where they would like to uphold the rule of international law. France is also active because of its colonies and bases in the Indian Ocean area. And so both countries have an interest in keeping open the sea lanes of communication. You've seen, the problem with the Houthis and the extra cost that this will add to all trade going from Asia to Europe, I mean, from India, for instance, to Europe, or from Europe to India via the sea, because it would have to go all the way around the Cape of Good Hope and come. So both countries have an interest in keeping open sea lanes of communication, ensuring the flow of trade and commerce, and upholding the rule of international law in international waterways. Having said that, France is not a neighbor of China. And Europe sees China as a very major trading partner, more so Germany than France, but France too. And I think they are a little more conscious now with America having, stepped up its efforts to convince its allies, about the threats posed by Chinese technology in their communication sector and so on. They're a little more aware, more conscious, because a, a lot of European countries which were heavily in debt sold out a lot of their, you know, uh, assets to Chinese companies, for instance, in Italy or Greece or, some of the other southern countries which were heavily, in debt at that time. And I think Europe has now become a little more conscious about this. Uh, and I think France perhaps, UK perhaps the most, because it's a closest ally of the US. But within Europe, I would say France perhaps more than Germany, even though, as I said, they do see China as a very important trading partner and would like to continue that trade and economic relationship for mutual benefit.
So let me ask you this question. Since you believe that Europe does see China as a major trading partner, it is believed that an area of interest for France are the ongoing negotiations for an India-European Union free trade agreement. Because the French view seems to be that an FTA of this nature would help in rebalancing ties with China. How much of a role do you think France can play in, achieving such an FTA?
I think they could be a key player in these negotiations. And I think Germany would be perhaps the most important, because they are our largest trading partner in the European Union and the largest economy. But actually, Germany and France have often worked together to shape the European agenda. And while the negotiations for an India-EU FTA had been suspended, I think in 2016 or so, they've been resumed. And I think both sides are keen that they can give a push to the process and wrap up a deal. So France can play an important role in providing a push to the negotiations on the India-EU FTA.
Final question, ma'am. There are many areas of convergence between India and France. Do you see any major areas of divergence between the two countries? Now, the Russia-Ukraine war has been won, but it doesn't really seem to have had any adverse impact on bilateral ties.
Well, I think that, you can see that across the Western world, including the US, while there would have been more comfort if India had, you know, followed their positions on Ukraine, I think we have been able to create understanding of our position vis-a-vis Russia. And if you look at the time that the Ukraine crisis first erupted in 2013-14, at that time it was Germany and France who actually helped to negotiate with Russia and Ukraine the Minsk Accords. So it is possible that these countries could once again play a role, and I would hope that they choose to do so, because an open-ended conflict, as it looks at the moment, where everybody says we are in it with you for the long haul, come what may, we'll do whatever it takes kind of position, which is an open-ended conflict. In a nuclearized situation, it's not desirable, especially when the framework of strategic stability between the US and first the Soviet Union and later Russia is coming apart, with both countries walking out of agreements. So you've had the US walk out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, then the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, and then you've had, Russia, then they didn't ratify the CTBT, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Now you've had Russia saying that they are suspending the implementation of the New START agreement that they signed and ratified with Barack Obama. And also that they may stop implementing, or they may also withdraw their ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So it really looks like the whole framework for strategic stability, so painstakingly put in place, is unraveling, and that's not desirable for the world.
Absolutely. The world, unfortunately, is witnessing too many wars at a time of great economic distress. On that note, Ambassador Meera Shankar, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us, ma'am.